Let's go. I'm anxious, I'm fearful. People like to put both of those in the same bucket, but they're not the same.
Anxious, fearful,
Yeah.
and aliens.
Yeah, so I want to talk about the Plejaren spirit teaching. Because a lot of it has to do with the human psyche. A lot of it. So much. Because there's realizations that have to happen in the mind first before you can appreciate what the spirit is.
This is our first, I'm going to stop you because this is our first series for this. So would you kind of step back and explain Billy Meyer and what's going on? I mean, we've done a couple with Billy Meyer.
Yeah.
But explain where these teachings come from, the German books, and kind of just give a little quick historical context on this.
Okay.
Before we get into what they're saying.
Early 50s up until now, there's a guy in this place called Hinterschmid-Rudi, Switzerland. He's a Swiss-German. His name's Billy Edward Albert Meyer. He has a series of telepathic contacts to start in his younger years with this entity called Svath. That progresses to the point where he becomes comfortable with the telepathic communication, that they show up and actually greet him in person so that he's relatively comfortable for it. And then he goes through, goes on trips in their beam ships all across this universe, other universes, different dimensions of time. They teach him things, teach him about the spirit, teach him about himself. They're very data-driven. And they drop him off, and he comes back, and he takes all these photos that people have contested for a long time. By the way, the guy's got one fucking arm. I don't know how he would do all this with one arm. You should see him type. It's incredible. And then he takes all these teachings, and he offloaded them into written material. And within this material, you can buy these books. Some of them are translated in English, but most of them are not. They're still in German. And they teach a lot about the spirit, creational laws, and other things of that nature. All right? So it's a dude from the 50s, starting his childhood, meets up with this group called the Plejaren. Telepathic communication leads to a physical communication. They travel everywhere. He learns about history, things moving through time.
Where's the Plejaren from, though?
Plejaren are from a time-shifted dimension in the area of the Pleiades. So if you look at the Pleiades, no life really exists there.
Right.
But if you time shift the dimension, a dimensional shift, life exists. It's almost like something sitting in a different phase state. Does that make sense?
Yes. No, that makes
Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there.
Yes.
It's in that geographic area, but
Right.
it's time shifted. You got to think about the locality of space and time, right?
Well, I mean, they've proven this. Science has proven this.
Correct. So that's where they exist. And I want to talk about a very fundamental aspect here that happens in the mind. And this slows a lot of human evolution. And it gets harped on a lot by the Plejaren, and that's anxiety and fear. So I want to talk today about the differences between anxiety and fear and how they're separate. They're separate things. So when you think of anxiety, I know I told you my definition earlier, but when do you start to feel anxious about something?
I think for me, it's either when I don't understand something, but I get fearful on it, or I lose control, or I don't know an outcome. I think for me, number one, when I get really anxious is when I don't know the outcome.
Okay, so you're hypothetical in your mind. I
And
have no
it's
idea what the
negative to
outcome
me.
is.
Yeah.
Okay. And if things don't make sense, I don't understand it, that means you don't have the data.
Right.
So you got to start spearheading some ideas, some hypotheses in your mind,
Right.
and then you begin to worry about these hypotheses. So the tract that in your mind that anxiety takes is one of having no rational basis for actually being like, I need to worry about this thing.
Yeah, no, I get that. Yeah.
Because it's a strictly hypothetical environment that anxiety lives in. It's a lack of rational thought that leads to the state of worry. Because you don't know the outcome. You don't know why it's like this.
It's like we're in a fog.
You have no data supporting it, nothing.
And it's I watched that samurai thing on Netflix, and so they're always fighting in these,
Always in
Japanese forests, and it's in this fog, and it's like everything's quiet, and you just know that any moment all hell's gonna break loose.
Yeah.
And so there's this anxiety.
The Shogun are nuts.
Yeah.
The thing is, they don't have the data.
Yeah.
You can't see. So you live in that state of anxiety. Now, where's the difference change? When is it an actual legitimate fear? When is it something that the worrying actually makes sense?
Because I'm swimming in the ocean in Australia, and I'm anxious about a shark. I get fearful when I see a fin in front of me.
Yeah.
Because I saw the data, and it doesn't look good.
It doesn't look good. But say I'm just out in the open ocean, and I don't see anything. I have no data for what's underneath me or above. So then that's just anxiety.
Yes.
I'm hypothesizing about all these things, and that's what I'm living in. Now, fear, legitimate fear, is where I have data of a definite outcome.
Yes.
I know something's going to happen. Logical, rational steps are leading to this specific thing. Then it makes sense that you should be worrying. Now it's a state of fear. So now it becomes a question, can I control this state of worry and accept the fundamental fact that this is going to happen? Can I actually rationalize that within the self?
And I do that. This is how I do it. And I think I learned this from like some 1920s book a long time ago. I read this in my late 20s and it helped me a lot with fear, not anxiety, but fear. Once I have the data, I always go worst case scenario and then see what that outcome's going to be.
Yep.
And then prepare for that outcome. So if I say, and I was sharing this with somebody the other day, I was saying they were wanting to, they live in 2 different countries and they're wanting to see their fiance.
Okay.
And so now you have one country COVID laws, the other country COVID laws. And so she was talking to me about, she hasn't seen him in over a year and she's super excited and she was stressing out with the visas and all that stuff. And I told her, I was like, you're going to see your fiance. What is worst case scenario? And she said, we have to meet in Dubai for 20 days only. And I was like, okay, so prepare for that.
Yeah.
This was and this may be like Stoic philosophy or something, but prepare for that. Prepare to go to Dubai. You're still going to meet him, but you only get to see him for 20 days, not the months that you were wanting to see in this different country. So it's what happens to your brain, and I want you to talk about this. What happens to your brain is when you accept worst case scenario, it's kind of like, okay, I can be rational now.
Yeah, because you're accepting an outcome.
Yeah,
and then
there we go.
You can act within a rational outcome. But anxiety is causing you to act within an irrational outcome on a state of no data. So if we can act and create choices, cause and effect interactions before the state of extremely high probability going to happen, well, then now we're starting to do things. Now we can actually work with the fear. Now we can say, okay, how do I curtail the fear? How do I actually work with it rather than fight it? Rather than fight what's going to happen,
right?
How do I make my decisions now up to that point?
Let me talk about fighting and anxiety. Stay there, and I want you to talk to this. Blue on blue, when you're in battle. That's what they call it, blue on blue. That's, and we had a lot of this, especially in like Afghanistan and stuff like that. So basically, what it is, it's same peeps. So let's say United States, it's the Army and Marines, and they're in 2 different hill country, and they don't realize it, but they're actually mortaring each other or shooting towards each other, and they think it's the enemy. So what causes that? So now we're creating harm to people that are working for the same, government. So, or however you want to look at it. So I don't want to get into war, but military industrial complex, all that, because I was involved in that. But what created the blue on blue? Somebody shot at somebody else. They weren't supposed to.
It was hypothetical.
Because there was no information.
It was totally hypothetical that that's the enemy.
Yes, here we go.
You didn't know for a fact. So then you have anxiety. And what's your anxiety? How do you deal with your anxiety? Pull the trigger. That's not how you fix it. In uncertainty.
So what is because this is what I want to get into. So what created the blue on blue, and what causes a reaction from someone else when you go out with your vibration of anxiety?
Well, then you get it's sent back to you in return. You send out a mortar, you're going to get one back. You were acting in the hypothetical. You acted emotionally. You didn't realize the emotion and try and rationally deal with it. You acted emotionally, right? Through this anxiety, lack of info, and then it doubled back right on you.
This is really good because there's every single one of us have anxiety and fear.
Yeah.
And so being able to be self-aware to separate them.
Well, let's talk about the fear then. Okay. Same blue on blue scenario. I'm on one hill, somebody else is on the other. I launch one shot. The other shot gets launched. I then have a call to say, do we have our own people on the other side? And if someone says yay or nay, there's your data answer.
Right.
Now it's no longer a state of anxiety and guessing. Now I can stop shooting. My fear, I can rationalize that fear and be like, oh, wait a minute. I no longer have to worry.
How do we make that call though? How do we collect that data in
like
our
calling
anxiety?
that third person
instead of letting our emotions overcome
that eye in the sky? Call to yourself. Call to even if when you call it your higher self, call to that higher self. Does this make sense? Is it best for me to act like this? You need to go through those questions. Key in on that mic. Key in on the internal mic of you and say, okay, do I need to be anxious about this? Let's walk through this logically. No. Okay, then I don't need to be doing this.
Why am I being, I say that all the time. Why am I being anxious right now? This is stupid.
Correct.
That's how I say it.
Yeah. And that just takes time. It takes practice. But I want to make sure that we set a definitive difference between what anxiety is and what fear is.
Okay, let's get into fear. So we've understood anxiety. So let's take the second part of this and go into fear. We have an outcome. We know it's going to be bad.
Mm-hmm.
So we see, okay, you go to the doctor. You got this anxiety. You're waiting 10 minutes for the doctor comes in because you don't know the outcome. So you're anxious. Doctor comes in, gives you bad news.
Fuck.
So yeah, now now you have fear.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have fear.
Why? Because you have data.
Yes, because you have data that's saying,
hello, so-and-so, you have cancer.
Yeah, you have this, you have that.
Okay.
Now what? How do we respond to fear?
That's the real thing. Now that you have the data, how do you act? Do you act irrationally? No, because now you have the data in front of you. Okay, now how do I work with this thing that is an absolute? Rather than work with an inabsolute and say, do this, do that, and then you spread your energy everywhere. Now I can focus on integrating with what this data is showing me. Great. Now let me work on this. Let me key into the self. Let's see all the options we have. Let's pull them all in. Let's figure out how each one is going to determine what's going on with my health in this doctor scenario. Which one's going to be best for me at this moment? Which one is the healthiest approach in mindset and also physical action for me to deal with whatever this medical outcome might be at this moment? That's what you got to do. But don't drop into the hypothetical, do I die tomorrow? And it's like, no one knows when you're going to die. No one has that exact date on it. Unless you got a temporal drive on a ship, you go back and forth and you see your own death, but that's separate from that. Most people couldn't handle it. What you got to do is be like, okay, I don't know when I'm going to die, but I know I have this thing. Let's work with what I have. Let's work with the data. But the second I start straying away from it and creating more anxiety, I double down on the energy that will continue to make me sick. Because if I become sick in mind and I'm already physically ill in the body, well, then I'm just like again, it becomes a blue on blue situation. It's not helping. I don't need to pump anxiety in to the state of fear because I have a definite and then I start bringing in indefinites. I don't want to work with that. Let me work with the definite. I see the data. Now I got to go do this. These are the processes I can take. Here's how I work with it most probabilistically. Bang, bang, bang. You can be very strategic about it. But anxiety lacks any sort of strategy because there's no definite outcome. It's a completely hypothetical world you're living in. And you create actions on this hypothetical and you let it control you.
But we also allow fear to control us.
Of course we do. That's because fear, because you have a definite outcome, you should essentially feel better about it. Okay, I'm being fearful. This is actually something I can work with. This is a very tangible point in your life when you have a fear, if it's a legitimate fear.
There's a shark right there.
Let me consider.
And it's circling me.
Because at that moment, now it's like, let me drop back to all the choices I've made that led me up to this moment. Let me think about cause and effect.
Why am I in the middle of an ocean?
Why am I in the middle of the ocean?
I thought this was a great idea to be swimming.
And it's not. And now that you're faced with the legitimate thing that is right here, the real data, it forces you to reflect on all these other things and say, this was an error, this was good, this was an error, and how that chain of events led to this point.
Yeah, how far am I from the boat? I know I've watched all these stupid National Geographics. I know if I punch them in the nose or kick them in the nose, sharks don't like that. You can start processing
now you
this
start
data.
processing differently, okay? And now going forward, you are much more conscious about your life and your choices and cause and effect. Fear in those states when you're pressed, okay, when you are most worn down is when you're most honest with yourself. We've talked about this many times.
Yes.
So if you really use that fear and integrate with it and understand it and how you got to this point, it will change your decision making. That's why I talk about death. People are fearful of death. Death is not an anxiety. That's an assurance. That's a guarantee you're going to die.
You're going to die.
So now that you have that guarantee, what choices will you make going up to it, and how do you reflect on the ones you've made in the past?
Yes.
But if I have an anxiety about death, saying, am I going to die or am I going to live forever? I don't know. Well, then you just live in a constant life of hypothetical. It doesn't work.
Well, you're being untruthful, too.
And then nothing's learned.
Because you haven't accepted the inevitable, which is death.
Yeah, that's correct. So you're not being truthful with the self. So these are the clear defining lines between anxiety and fear.
And so what do the Plejaren say about fear and anxiety? Because you had read me something earlier.
Yeah, so when we talk about teaching of truth in this world, okay, they were talking to Billy Edward Albert Meyer, and they said, you doing these writings, you speaking to the world, you being, public about this. They said you must understand that you need to live simply with modesty, honesty, and love. If you don't do these things
simply with honesty, say that again, because that's very important.
You need to live simply with modesty, honesty, and love. I need to be modest. I don't need to be boastful. I don't need to do these things, because you're going to do that, it degrades your teachings. I'm trying to scream from the mountaintops. No.
So this is very important. Modest doesn't mean that you have to live poor.
No. Modest is a mindset.
Yes, yeah. I want people to understand that, because it's like somebody's wearing.
If these teachings,
somebody has a Chanel clothes on right now, and they're thinking, I need to get rid of this.
He doesn't have to go on the street like a Jehovah's Witness and hand out his books.
Yeah, exactly.
He can type it, and the world will find it when the world is ready to find it.
Yeah.
That's being modest about it. He lives a simple life. He's a farmer. Okay? He's honest. He always speaks the truth, because that's the highest respect you can give to somebody and to yourself.
I love that.
And he lives with love, because he wants to understand creation and you. That's what love is finding that understanding. And they say that qualifies Billy Edward Albert Meyer to carry the message of this mission that he's on. And that's the teaching of the Spirit, right? The teaching of truth out into our world that we're currently living in this time. And they say that shall take effect one day into the distant future, long after he's dead. And he realizes that too. People won't value it greatly until much, much further down, when the anxiety is eradicated from the world, where the truth eradicates the hypothetical, the stuff that is completely unbased.
Yeah, and I love what they said about humanity in general and war and stuff like that.
Well, yeah. So here's the quote. In that anxiety is eradicated from the world, and all human beings will be without anxiety and fear. It's not anxiety/fear. It's anxiety and fear. It's like people are combining these things. And indeed, also in association with this, far into the future, after people understand the truth, okay, that one day the use of weapons for bellicose and murderous purposes, whether for saying I own this territory, or I want to be greater than you, or whatever, I want to own more resources, or I just want to kill people for the hell of it, and so forth, it will cease. That will no longer exist when the truth will truly reign, okay? And weapons will only be used for work and self-defense. That's all. And when they say work, okay, if I want to go out and feed myself, well, I got to go shoot something. That's work. You have to put in labor for that. Or if someone is trying to harm life, human life, well, then we need to defend human life.
Yes.
That's when you use it for defense, not for a power control. Because why is it that you go out and you want to enforce things? Why is it you go to war? Because you want to maintain control. Because you have anxiety about somebody else's move.
I mean, globally, look at the nuclear showdown.
Correct. It was all anxiety.
It was back and forth. They have nukes. We don't. We need nukes. We need bigger ones. We need ones that reach farther.
Yeah. And that's why it's so fundamentally important to understand anxiety and fear. Because once you can work with those, you can integrate. And once you have that integration, you can start to lean more towards the truth. It affords you clarity in your life.